Tēnā koutou and welcome to this by-election special series with Manawatū People's Radio and the Manawatū Standard. We are here in Hancock Community House. We have Jimmy Ellingham, senior reporter. He'll be fact-checking throughout the interview and asking some questions from listeners and readers. And in this series, we are interviewing the candidates in the Palmerston North City Council by-election, the hopefuls vying for the seat left vacant by Tangi Utikere in 2020. And in this episode, we have Ross Barber. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning.
This is not your first time on the campaign trail for the City Council, is it?
No.
How many times have you had to go?
I'm not sure.
No, it's been a few. And you've also gone for mayor as well?
Yes.
A couple of times. How's the campaign been going? Have you been active in the campaign? Are you getting around meetings?
Yeah, we've been really meeting with a lot of people, really concerned with the corruption in our city and really concerned with the violence in our city as well. Just the other day, we had mobs to come up to my property and try to stand over an invalid living in a caravan and took his car key and his phone. And we went along to the police and said to the police, well, you know, what could we trespass this guy? And can you put a get his phone back? You know, because obviously you can trace phones. And the policeman said no. And it's just like, well, and the guy is actually on the run from the police. So you say, well, you know, you could have actually caught the guy because if you located his phone, and you could have arrested him because obviously they're out looking for this I think it was mongrel mob person.
In fairness, the City Council doesn't have a lot of oversight, in fact none at all, on the police. But I take your point that there is crime and there are issues that need to be resolved.
Well,
but
it's not crime, it's lawlessness.
Fair enough.
The endemic lawlessness, you know, the cars getting broken into in Palmerston, the home invasions, the methamphetamine, a lot of these problems are not being addressed in the council. We're just living in la-la land. You've got totally incompetent people there that seem to enjoy, and this is the thing, they're sadistic in that they enjoy the people being
well, no, let's
violated.
Let's be clear, Ross. I don't think we can say that they enjoy it.
I wouldn't brag about that you don't think, because could you explain that?
Well, as general human beings, I don't think most people.
Well, we know you don't
like
think
to
that,
see.
so obviously that's why you're doing your job.
The point.
That's
that
why your job is to ask me questions.
Okay.
So I do the thinking. Okay.
Okay, I'll ask you a question. Given the current
that much intelligence,
Ross, every time I have interviewed you, I've given you space.
Just ask a question.
I will ask you a question. As a potential city councillor in the city council, what can you do with reference to crime when that is a police issue, which the council don't have oversight of?
Well, I mean, the corruption starts from the top. So we've got the city council that is ignoring high court orders and just bring laws into themselves. So when you've got your city council and people in this council ignoring the high courts and going against high court rulings, then it means a whole pyramid or a whole system of corruption and
so
lawlessness.
Give me an example of that, of them being ignorant or ignoring a high court order. Give me an example.
Well, we've got with my farm, they're trying to charge. Is it Francis Evans charged me? He's trying to give default penalties on my farm, and I says, look, we paid $28,000 to Horizons last year, and my farm is under a court order where the court order has a property manager who says, well, the property manager is liable for the rates, and they want to ignore, and we says, well, please show us explain to us how you have the legal right to charge us when we've already paid the rates and things, and they totally ignore and just obfuscate any responsibility or any of my questions. So they just railroad you, and they bully. So they're bullying people and railroading people with no legal right and against the high court rulings. And this is we've also got land down at Albert Street. The High Court has ruled on that my family owned this land, and the city councils have gone against the High Court rulings.
Do you have evidence of anything like this that doesn't affect you personally? And I'm not suggesting that the issues you face are somehow less important, but it starts to sound like you have a personal grudge with the council. Do you have evidence of this affecting other people?
Yes, we find the corruption and lawlessness endemic, and the city council was a municipal, and if you look at my policies, they're reinstating the municipal corporation, getting back the electricity, the phone, the water, all of these assets that belong to the city corporation, to ease the burden on rates and to make our city financially, the current financial state of most cities in New Zealand is very, very bleak. They've been totally mismanaged, and all of them are have neglected infrastructure for their own greed. And we also find that the people in positions of power and authority have actually taken assets and own assets and companies that don't belong to them. And so until the city gets reinstated, it's the assets so they can generate income from these profitable industries. Then it's pretty hard work to because your capitalisation of your city is always going to be on the back foot. You've got to be dependent upon on banks, and these are clandestine banks. So you're always doing dodgy finances and dodgy accounting to make your numbers count up. Your auditors are obviously complicit and accessories to fraud, really. I don't know if they have auditors actually. Last time I looked at the auditors of the City Council, it was a bit of a joke.
You've said in your candidate profile that you want to adopt a McDonald's model. Now, forgive my ignorance, I don't know what that is.
Well, it's where you go along, you pull up at the door, you pay your money, a few minutes later you get your product. If you look at Manawatū Council and Fielding, they're growing, they're dynamic, they're doing it, they're subdividing, they've got a lot of growth within that area. You look at Palmerston City Council, totally inept and incompetent. It's failing, and so you've got to say, well, why? How come Palmerston people are being made to sacrifice because of the ineptitude and incompetence of the city council? And you certainly look at the councillor's experience or the lack of experience, and you look at Grant Smith's lack of leadership, and you look at the lack of quality or people that have actually achieved anything or have got any ability to achieve anything or any new ideas. I mean, you look at what are they doing? They're putting a bridge in the showgrounds that doesn't even have a stream running underneath it. How's that help flood protection? And
these all seem, these are all concerns that you want to bring to the council table if you're elected. You're only going to be one voice around a table of 16. Do you think you would have enough support around the table for some of your views to enact any of the change that you want to see?
Well, as I'll be doing it voluntary, which is important that our council has voluntary people on it, because the current people are only there for their own needs, they're not there for the city. But it does give the council some integrity when you have one person like this voluntary and is actually there to represent the people, not a political party, or not to represent or stand for some outside some European organisation, some New World Order, or some working for some drug company that wants to vaccinate everybody.
So, for example, if it was the will of the people and it was clearly evidence that the majority of the people liked the idea of the redevelopment at the arena and the bridge without a creek under it, you would support and advocate for that, because that would be the people's choice. Most
probably, as a councillor, I'd be forced to oppose to everything unless it was my conscience. It was something to do with human rights or those things, but I'd most probably oppose because don't oppose the system. I feel it would be a hypocritical of me for actually a vote for anything really. So as a general rule, I'd be opposing everything.
Okay. I credit to you. You're one of the few candidates that's mentioned COVID-19 in your candidate profile, and you've referenced the need for biosecurity to protect the city from COVID-19. What do you mean specifically?
Well, I mean, the experts in biosecurity are primary industries, so obviously you consult them. I think it was Professor Morris at Massey University. He was the one that made that, the mad cow disease computer model that they used throughout the world. So you'd want to consult with our experts at Massey University. The purported experts appear to be more clandestine scientists than they are and political appointees, as opposed to having any genuine interest or knowledge in contagious outbreaks and how to control or create biosecurity. Certainly, if Auckland's current situation, we should be stopping flights from Auckland and banning people that have been in quarantine from coming to Palmerston North, coming to the Manawatū and to the Horizons region until they can. Just stop them altogether. Really, we haven't got the facilities in our region to cope with the funding or the facilities to cope with an outbreak, and therefore our best line of defence is to prevent the thing coming into the Palmerston North and to repel those people or return the people that are at risk, because obviously the government failing, the government's biosecurity is failing, and the people are being put into the hotels are at a greater risk because they're actually catching. That's where it's spreading, is in the government's biosecurity facilities. Well, that's disastrous. It's total incompetence. That's the way that they we will say, well, this is actually the government's agenda, because they want to vaccinate people in spite of their science, and we say, well, that's more to do with German drug manufacturers or whatever. And a lot of these drug manufacturers financed chemicals in the Agent Orange and chemicals and things, and that are pretty nasty and haven't had a really good impact upon the world.
Just before we turn to Jimmy for some questions from listeners and readers, again, I go back to the point that you'll be one voice around a Palmerston North City Council table, and yet your statement says you want to amalgamate Horizons and return Manawatū's birthplace, Foxton. What do you see the role of the City Council in any of that? To me, that doesn't appear relevant.
Well, the funding of the city on its current population is unsustainable. It's uneconomic. So the best way for the City Council to move forward is to gain more revenue. To gain more revenue, it needs to increase its territory. And certainly. Foxton being in Horowhenua is appalling. It's this side of the river. It's Manawatū colleges and things. Same with, and it also needs developing. Certainly, for our city to look at growing. It's must be uneconomic for our city to expand itself because we've got such a large area already, and the eroding infrastructure can't cope with that. So it's mostly more economic for our city to develop smaller cities and or towns and things, to focus the growth on them, so that it eases the pressure on the Palmerston North infrastructure. And this is a huge concern. We'd sort of like to see a motorway between Fielding and Palmerston North. There's just so much needs to be done around town. We're already unhappy with the roading. The incompetence in the NZTA is just sickening. They spend $1 billion on a road through Transmission Gully and it's still got all these huge problems within Wellington City and within the cities that you can't stop people driving through. They've got traffic lights on State Highway 1. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, let's turn to Jimmy Ellingham from the Manawatū Standard for questions from listeners and readers.
Thank you, Fraser, and good morning. Ross, while we're talking about roading, that was a popular question from readers about how will you fix our roads, and also what's your view on cycleways?
We have concerns that, when they put in the bridge, they've stuffed up the massive bridge there. They should have put an underpass in there going back around the other way. It's very difficult to get the traffic from one side of a main road to the other. Certainly, and I hate how they put concrete in the middle of roads. I mean, these are disastrous for cyclists and motorcyclists, because if a cyclist or motorcyclist hit concrete, they often are going to be falled off, and then there's a risk they could go under a car and be killed. So we want to get rid of all the concrete out of the roads for a start, and we want to implement 2-lane roads throughout the major areas like Ruahine Street and the areas with the significant problems. Putting in traffic lights and roundabouts isn't really helping speeding up the flow of people. You've got to get people moving through your city fastly to get them off the roads. It's the whole idea of what the current regime has done. It seems to be quite ignorant and backward thinking.
So what's your position on cycleways alongside of that? Do they have a place?
Well, we'd rather prefer the cycleways were moved onto the footpaths in a lot of cases. Certainly in that, like in Ruahine Street, they could be moved off the road and onto the footpaths, and that there would free up more another lane of road, so we could put make the road two lane. Certainly, that's our roads haven't been. No money's really been spent on our roads for significant money for quite a long period of time, and the current regime has neglected roading and expenditure on the roading. Certainly, the NZTA has to start paying some money. If they've got $1 billion to build these stupid roads in the hills and things that run horrendous costs, then they need to start acting to their responsibility. They're making a lot of money out of Palmerston North and not giving nothing back.
You speak about money, and one of the questions we had from readers and listeners is how do you keep our rates down? A lot of the ideas you've just spoken about would be quite expensive, so how would you strike that balance between doing that and not making rates rises unaffordable?
Yeah, well, the big thing is like creating a whole new economy, really, and to do that, you really need to create your own currency. So either printing your own money or going to Bitcoin, which is most probably very profitable way of doing it. The rates. Currently, it's getting to the stage where it's uneconomic for people to own properties because they're having the cost of their rates is so high, and they increase because of course rates are going to double pretty soon. So this causes rents to also increase. So it's not just rates you've got to be concerned with, it's about rents. And so rents are going up. You're getting a lot of people starting to live in garages and slums. So you get these huge slums starting up, and this is a big concern not just in New Zealand, but if you look at America, some of these big American slums that are starting up, and certainly the current political situation in America is looking like it's going to lead to some sort of a civil war, and they have these things called FEMA camps where they just put people into large detention centres. I was reading the other day, there's one in India with excess of 1 million people, and you've got to remember there's over 60, 70 million people in refugee camps as well, which is just, you can say, well, FEMA camps don't exist, but in a way, a refugee camp is sort of like a FEMA camp.
Thanks, Ross. There's a couple more questions because we're conscious of time to get through. You report that you had a property manager in place, and that was in place, I think, since September 2017. The advice we've had is that it's possible that if you were to win this by-election, you wouldn't be able to take your seat because you don't control your own affairs. Have you sought any advice on this to see what the position is? There's
no property manager in place for my property. I have full capacity of my own personal welfare, my own property. It's only my business affairs that I have a partial incapacity, that I'm unable to manage my business and company affairs. Obviously, I need having owned and managed or run a huge company. We employed vets and a lot of accountants. We had math and lawyers.
Given that
that
you don't control it, have you sought advice about whether or not you could take your council's seat? Because in the past we've spoken to officials about this, and they've said it's likely that if you were to win, that you couldn't take your seat given that order.
Yes, but they've given the media said lots of obfuscation about me, and this is just the total. It shows how wrong the media are, and they continue to get it wrong. But people,
Ross, can you take your seat? Can you take your seat, Ross?
Beg your pardon?
Will you be able to take your seat if you were to win? Yes or no?
I've no. Why, if the people vote for something, what are you saying?
Because the
Are you
advice
saying that? That's a really interesting view of democracy.
well, the
Isn't
advice
it?
we've had is you might not be able to, but I'll move on. And who nominated you and who seconded you?
Ang nominated me as a refugee that's was sort of helped quite a lot, and I've forgotten the other one.
That's all right. People can seek that out, I believe, through the council if they're interested to see who seconded Ross Barber's nomination. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, and from me, Ross, thank you for joining us, and all the best on the campaign.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for in this episode of the NPR and Manawatū Standard by-election special. Other episodes are available at npr.nz/show/by-election 21, with the series also running during the first week of February at 9 a.m. Monday to Friday on NPR, which is 999 a.m. across Manawatū, or via our live stream at npr.nz. Of course, keep an eye on the Manawatū Standard for further coverage of the candidates, their campaigns and the results on the 22nd of February. And remember, your vote must be posted by 12 p.m. on Wednesday the 17th of February in a DX mailbox or directly to the council to count in this election. Thank you for joining us. Tēnā koutou.